Allister is a 3-time achiever of the Business Working Responsibly mark from Accenture. And O'Leary from Vodafone, they achieved the mark for the first time last year. Dee, congratulations, you've just achieved the mark in RTE. And Tony O'Malley is a 2-time mark achiever, was recertified this year. So I'm going to have this question for everybody because we've been hearing a lot about how sustainability has come of age. But that puts a lot more pressure on you as busy people already. It was a year and a week ago, and it seems like a long, long time, a longer time than that, when Donald Trump was elected. God help us. Soon after, withdrew from the Paris Climate Change Agreement. Charlottesville happened. His business council pretty much fell apart because of a lot of employees in those companies that sat at that business council said, we don't want our CEOs at that council. So now as a CEO, you're expected to know about climate change. You're expected to have opinions about diversity, social inclusion. It's a lot. How do you think your role has changed? Allistair, I'm going to start with you.
I think the role has changed in three or four material ways. One is speed. You know, the rate of change is extraordinary and just getting faster. Or if you stopped using linear or quadratic, whatever, it's logarithmic now, whatever that is. So the speed of things, I think the amount of data that is thrown at you that you might want, most of which you don't want, your ability to deal with that. Disruption used to be a bad word, but now it seems to be the de rigueur word. I used to hate the word disruption. Now it's the word we probably use most of all. But I think the biggest change is the speed at which you have to make decisions and the judgment you have to use because the amount of information, the complexity of the information is enormous. The final point I'd make is just the workforce is utterly different to that which I joined and the generation after me and the generation after them at this stage.
Yeah.
So I think those are the big changes in terms of how you respond.
And are you expected to have a point of view about these issues, like climate change?
Yeah, I mean, I was very struck by what the governor said and what Rick said. If we'd sat here 10 years ago, we probably wouldn't have heard those comments. It wouldn't have been as relevant. Sustainability wouldn't have been on the agenda. The impact on the workforce and the desire of the workforce, the millennial, isn't the only issue. I think we all want to see change because we can see it happening around us. So I think there is it's more than a groundswell now. We're past a point where sustainability is at front and center. Whereas heretofore it would have been your quarterlies, your sales, yes, your blah blahs, whatever. Now it's part of the agenda.
Which is great to hear. Anne, over to you.
I mean, we have 2.3 million customers in Ireland, and I think the expectations by them has changed. I think there's much more transparency. I think with social media, etc., questions are much more being asked about brands, you know, your supply chain, your diversity and inclusion statistics, what kind of your employer you are. There's much less tolerance, I think. So as a company, you're always worried about your reputation and actually every decision you make. So for me and the decisions we make in Vodafone, it's always around, is this the right thing to do? Is it the right thing to do for our customers? From our own perspective, our own ethics and behaviour, is this some decision that we can look back on in 5 years' time and understand the basis of that decision? So I think it's the right change.
Yes.
And whether it's around energy or climate or transparency of pricing or pay equality or that sense of purpose, like what is your business about? Why do you work every day? Why do you go to work every day? I mean, as a CEO, I ask that, and my employees ask that. And obviously, we're trying to compete for talent. And in Vodafone, we compete with all the large multinationals. You know, why do they join Google versus a Vodafone? So as a CEO, I spend a lot of time talking about how we build a better future, how we build a better Ireland, how that the work we do every day makes a difference and that people can feel empowered and proud of what they do. So as a leader, I think it's being authentic. I think you have to be much more transparent and in touch with your people and your customers. And those days of that distance really is gone. And the CEOs now and into the future You'll have to know a lot more about their values and what they stand for. And I think by being that way, you will not only deliver positive social change, but you will have superior financial and commercial results. And I see that in my business every day through the decisions we make. And I think it's important as CEOs that we walk the talk and not just talk it.
No, you're right. And I love the word authenticity. I think it's so important, actually. Dee, over to you.
Yeah, I think the role of being a leader has just changed fundamentally.
Fundamentally.
You know, I guess the people that we would have looked to as we came through our lives as leaders and us now in this room are very, very different. I think it's because, as everybody has said, the world is a very, very different place. And we're no longer just running a business, let's say, in our day-to-day lives. We're dealing with an awful lot more because that's now what's expected of us. And to Anne's point of authenticity, I think that is the fundamental number one thing for me, that it's no longer good enough to be one person out of work and another person in work. You have to bring your whole self to what you do. And I think that whole notion of a holistic approach to the workplace and to you as a leader is very, very important. Employees are demanding more and more, and rightly so, because they want to work for organizations that have policies on the environment, on biodiversity, etc. And therefore, you know, all of us have had to become way more aware of all of these areas. And you know, in an area like RTE, obviously, you know, we are the national broadcaster. We're a public service organisation, and the very nature of public service brings with it an awful lot of responsibility.
Yeah, that's true.
And not only in our output, but in how we deal with our staff, with our clients, and with everybody we engage with. So for me, you know, the role it's really vast, and I think it's for everybody in this room, because you're dealing with all of these things, but that is the nature of the game now, and I do think we're a better society for it. But the other thing I think that there is a lot to be gained from is by all of us talking and learning, because, and it's great to be here this morning, and it's, as I say, it's our first year getting the mark, and we're very proud to get it. But I do think it's that together we're going to even learn more and tackle the issues together. I'm
so glad you said that, because we're going to talk about collaboration later on. Tony, over to you.
Yeah, listen, I'd agree with what my fellow panelists have said so far. And for us within Fujitsu, we have a vision of a human-centric intelligence society. So there's a realization that we're all aware of the global challenges of increasing population, aging population, people living longer lives, and the additional challenges that it poses, the fact that there's scarcer resources. So there's a lot we can do, and there's a realization that we can't leave it to individual governments to take on these challenges. So as we as leaders within our individual sectors and in industry as a whole have to take a lead on this.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, we need to have a very detailed vision and a workable strategy to implement it. So it's good to have a vision, but that can be aspirational and lofty. So you need to have a workable strategy to implement it as well. And I think the onus is on us as well to be passionate about it and to be able to measure and articulate the benefits of running a sustainable business, and hence put pressure back on the financial markets, to what Rick's point earlier, and to get companies in the financial markets, I suppose, to respond by measuring companies not just by their profit, but by the good that they do as well.
That's it. It's the carrot and stick approach. I think Tina was talking about a big stick, but there's a carrot as well, because it can really change your business, and we'll talk about that in a second. I just want to dive into your sectors a little bit more and some challenges that you're facing. Dee, I might start with you. Kieran Mulvey's report was released last week about gender pay gap in RTE. I think it's only 4%. I think the national average, which is quite shocking, is 14%, which just let that sink in for a moment. But where to now? A lot of recommendations in the report, very brave to do the report. One of the recommendations is you do more reporting. Where to for now for RTE?
Yeah, I think it was, first of all, very important that we did this.
Yeah.
And we did it in a very open and objective way, which is why we asked Kieran Mulvey to do the report for us, to come in and to evaluate us on a gender and role level. You know, the findings were heartening in one respect, because you know, it found that we're balanced in our overall gender, with 48% female, 52% male.
Okay.
There are areas, of course, where we're maybe stronger in some areas, But for me, it's about now how we go forward and how we put both the diversity agenda and the gender pay gap on our radar. And I think number one in all of this is transparency. It's about having a culture of transparency around how we recruit, how people get promoted, pay grades. And there's a lot of work for us to now undertake on this, actually. But that's fine. I think it's important that we do because we have to move forward. So what we have now committed to, both myself and the executive board, to undertaking all of the recommendations, and we're putting together a very comprehensive people plan. Okay. And by that, what I mean is a plan from from recruitment, onboarding, right through exit, as to what our plan for our people is and what they can expect from us and what we expect of them as well. So I think now the fact that we know the benchmark, I think that's very important to know where you stand, that we now work very consciously on improving on that. We will report on this on a regular basis. And I also think discussions like this can be disruptive, but they can also put the issue on the table. And I think that's what is good about this. It's highlighting the issue, and we all have to work better at diversity. As I say, we're not doing badly, but we can do better. And again, I think I would hope that what we have done would encourage other organisations to come forward and look at a similar area. We've published our report. It's on our website for anybody to see. Again, part of, I guess, our approach to transparency. And again, I think it's together we're going to learn more about this area because, as Tina said, this has been talked about for a long time. It's not easy, and we have to work hard at it.
Absolutely, and there are financial benefs.
Absolutely. And I think again, for RTE, the area of, gender, ethnicity, both on and off the air are hugely important. And again, they're areas that we're working very, very hard on to get better at.
Keep us posted how you get on.
Absolutely.
And can I come to you, running a telecommunications company? You have a responsibility, I suppose, about how your products are used as well. And an area, I suppose, that I'm sure keeps you awake at night is the area of cyberbullying and how children are using technology. If you're on the bus in the morning, everybody is stuck to a screen like that. It's crazy. But Vodafone have taken on this responsibility and you're doing something about it. Why did you do it and what are you doing?
So as part of the Vodafone Foundation, we partnered with ISPCC Childline. So we've given them 2 million in cash, but also our employees are there to support them, as well as our technology. So now it's not just over the phone that children are contacting Childline, it's a whole digital. So we're upgrading their technology platform to support that. We also are putting our brand behind it. You might have seen the Head Bombs campaign, which is targeting children between 8 and 10. Talking makes you stronger. It's all about mental health and well-being of children. So as part of that CSR activity, we've worked with ISPCC Childline on cyberbullying. And we launched guidelines for parents and teachers for them to understand how to support children and ensure that we're looking after their mental health. We're also working from a national perspective now on some guidelines for the whole of the country. So this is, it's okay, it makes sense for us to do it because we're experts in the technology area. And obviously most of these kids have, Vodafone, and we're happy to do it and use that expertise that we have from other countries, but also it is part of our charitable social responsibility and getting all our employees behind it. And again, they, feel very purposeful and rewarded in terms of using the expertise they have to support ISPCC Childline. So it's kind of a natural area for us, and I suppose an area that our customers would expect us to take responsibility. And from our side, it's the last thing we want is that our phones being used for bullying, etc. And we will continue to work with schools and parents on best practice, on guidelines, and becoming the voice supported with ISPCC, who have a brand in that way. And we're very happy to do that, and that's, again, doing good work that people feel proud of. And when I talk to people about the ISPCC Childline partnership, people in Vodafone are really proud, and they're using their expertise in a good way, And our customers expect us to do that. And it is certainly not in our agenda to try and get more children. You know, we're quite happy for children not to get a phone until 12, 14, whatever, and that they are managed on the phone because of the access to what they can do with phones now.
It's changing.
It's changing. So whatever work we can do to minimise the negative impact of technology, we will do, and we feel very strongly about that.
And it's the right thing to do.
Absolutely. And sometimes, as I say, the right thing to do can be the hard thing to do. But, you know, like from our point of view, there is no business justification for ignoring that.
Yeah.
It's not going to be right in the long term. We want, it's technology for good. It's about connecting people to live a better life and to build a better future. That's what we want. It's technology for good. So it just makes good sense, good business sense, and people feel proud of what we're doing. And we can talk about what we're doing and build a stronger brand and a more trusted brand. So when people are making decisions about who to go to, because there's huge choice, you know, what you want is they say, well, I feel that's a trusted and reputable brand. I'd like to give them the business rather than somebody else.
And the same is for employees. And Allistair and Tony, I'm going to talk about talent with both of you, because you're in sectors that are competing for a lot of talent. How do you differentiate yourselves? But also, how do you avoid burnout as well? Allistair, I'm going to come to you on that one, because you know, Accenture is great for recruiting a lot of graduates, millennials, the buzzword of the day, millennials. But getting the graduates in, you have amazing clients that you have to service. We're in an always-on culture. How do you get that balance right so that they don't get burnt out? How do you actually, you recruit them, how do you get to keep them?
It's difficult,
yeah,
because you have clients who want you to do certain things at certain times, but you have to strike a balance between, and I think it's worse than it was, certainly, again, I go back to even 5, 10 years ago, the fact that the device is teased to you. You can't get away from it, it's at your bedside. So we've done a number of things in this area. We've worked very closely with a program called Thrive, which looks at the actual factual medical evidence of what devices do to you. The fact that when you open your phone in the morning at, say you wake up, heaven forbid, at 2 a.m. and you pick up your phone, the retinal aspect of it invokes the release of, I think it's called oxytocin, which gives you a mini buzz, apparently. Certainly does when I open the phone at 2 a.m. And you get an excitement factor. You don't realize it, but your body then becomes attuned to. So if your company is pumping, and we're very good at email, in fact, we used to be world-class at email, and we're now trying to reverse away from that. You pump information at people increasingly through email or those sorts of ways. So we're desperately trying to reformat the way we communicate with, whatever, 420,000 employees around the world, so they can personalize what they see. And you only send them the important stuff. So that's the first thing. So looking at real hard evidence and trying to educate, and that's probably the wrong word, inform people as to the impact of devices and technology, and trying to reduce that, because I think that's where the overload is. The old days, you could go home and you could probably switch off, metaphorically as well as physically. The second thing we've looked at is wellness. And I don't mean wellness in a kind of a fuddy way. I mean wellness in just giving people options around an awareness and information on diet, mental health, which I think is an increasing issue everywhere, and it's exacerbated by technology. And then the final thing is, how do you work and sit and operate? You know, the old kind of tightly compacted 80 square foot per person type offices. The way we're working now is totally different, where you need to be able to move around, you need to be able to provide collaboration spaces. So it's a real, I describe it as a menu approach. It's not a fixed, it's got a fixed price menu, thou shalt do the following things. It's trying to inform people, use proper evidence, and just trying to educate people properly. We've used a banner, of course, called Truly Human, but we're trying to get people to the point where they self-select what they do. There are triathletes in our business, there are people like me who abhor exercise, but you're trying to constantly find a balance between what works for people to allow them not to disconnect, but decouple from their stress, whether that's work stress, life stress, kid stress, whatever stress.
That's a cultural shift as well.
It is a massive cultural shift not to send an email at 10 p.m.
It is.
Just because you feel the urge, because it's a good time to do it or you forgot to do it.
No,
Don't send it.
I'm guilty of that as well. So yeah, no, culture is a huge thing. We
Me
could
too.
spend a whole conference on culture. Tony, I want to come on to you in the tech sector because you're competing, as Anne was saying, against the Googles and the Facebooks and the free lunches and the free salsa lessons on a Friday. How do you, and I do salsa, so, but how do you differentiate yourself as a brand through the lens of sustainability? You have some very interesting initiatives internally.
Well, I think attaining the mark and the fact that it's an independent standard helps greatly when it comes to attracting talent, I guess attracting business and indeed attracting investment. So even a large global corporation like Fujitsu, we compete internally within our corporate world for inward investment in terms of research, etc. So for them to know that we run a responsible business and we're doing the right things and delivering our promises is really, really important. Having the mark, which is an indicator of a values-driven business, is extremely important in terms of your existing employee base when it comes to engagement, when it comes to enablement, and also then for attracting new talent. And what we find is that when we look at the normal instruments within your responsible business program, things like your charity partnership, the fact that we've established a women's business network, and we expand those out from being internally focused to being externally focused. So we bring our suppliers into the ecosystem, we bring our customers in. That really increases the value and allows and opens up more opportunities for progression for our staff internally as well. And then I suppose speaking to the altruistic spirit that's within most people and when it comes to volunteering, etc., it's really, really important to be able to satisfy that requirement.
Yeah, I mean, I think 88% of millennials want to work for a values-driven company. I don't know who the other percentage are, but they want to work for a values-driven company and they want a company to make a difference on environmental and social issues. You make it mandatory to do unconscious bias training in Fujitsu, don't you?
We do. We do a lot of things to support our responsible business program, and I guess it's one of the reasons why we've got the re-accreditation. And I guess doing it for a second time, it isn't any easier, I guess, and there's more expected of you because you are maturing as an organisation. What the process does, and going through the process, which I think is really healthy, it allows you to hold a mirror up to your organisation. Yeah. You think you're doing the right things, well, let's be benchmarked against best practice. It identifies certain gaps, and I think the other thing it does, it gives you confidence that you're doing the right things. I think it also then provides a motivating factor that you are making a difference and you can do better as well. So to achieve the accreditation, as you said, we've introduced mandatory e-learning around anti-corruption, bribery, unconscious bias training, etc., to make sure that we're constantly evolving, improving, and moving on.
That's really interesting. And I suppose the theme of this morning is winning business or transforming the bottom line. Have you won business by being more sustainable and having the mark?
Absolutely. And I think it's fair to say, when I look around the room, there's a lot of people in this room who are existing customer of ours. Some of our biggest clients are actually people who have also achieved the mark. So we're dealing with organisations with similar values. And I find it's a bit of push and pull. Certain organisations will insist on it. Others, it's a great conversation starter when it comes to attracting a new business as well. Alaistair was mentioning earlier the fact that there is a proliferation now of data collection devices, data processing devices. So we're entering into a very challenging period, and we are entering into it now. And I think whole corporate social responsibility is moving on. And a term that's now being coined is corporate digital responsibility, or CDR.
I've never heard of that one.
And it's whereby we need a more robust, responsible program to deal with some of the new challenges. And I think some of the drivers for that would be the fact data protection, would be the fact that we have the impacts and challenges now arising from the use of and the increased use of automation, AI and robotics. There's the ethical and moral question around the use of some technologies. And then there is the digital divide in terms of accessibility to a lot of these new services, those that have and those that have not as well. And that's what's driving this new CDR program.
Yeah, and it's going to be, as you said, disruption is the new normal, I think.
Yeah.
And Dee, just on the mark, you're a newbie to the mark, the class of 2017, but what do you hope to get out of it? What are the benefits to RT so far?
Well, I think the first benefit was just going through the process.
Yeah.
And I suppose assessing ourselves as an organisation through a different lens and looking at all of these areas which are hugely important, but with a real sense of focus and a sense of purpose. And I think also it's been really enlightening to see areas of the organisation who are excelling in some of these areas, and now we can highlight even more their achievements. And I take the work of the environmental group, for example, who
Really
have done incredible
Yeah.
work at RTE, whether it's, we have a scheme right around the campus and in all of our regional offices where batteries get recycled, the proceeds go to the Laura Lynn Children's Hospice, printer cartridges get recycled and go to Crumlin Children's Hospital. You know, we have a lot of things going on, which I suppose maybe people now see them as, oh, of course they're there, aren't they? But they take a lot of effort and work to put out, and we're building and working on more. For example, you know, we are donating all of our unused sandwiches from the canteen at the end of the day to a shelter.
Oh, great.
And our taxi firm, our taxi partner, are doing that voluntarily for us.
Oh, fantastic.
So it's opened up a lot of great discussion. You know, would you believe it? We're actually using our compost in a barter situation with our plant provider. You know, so there's some really interesting innovations come out, and I think what this has been brilliant for me and for the organisation is to say we have great work going on. Let's build on it. Again, there are some areas we have absolutely got to improve on.
Absolutely.
And I think that now gives us a great foundation to go forward and to put in place you know, objectives and maybe and targets, because, you know, again, and, you know, being a public service organisation, you know, it was mentioned earlier about the public sector target of reducing, you know, energy use by 33% by 2020. We're on that. You know, we've reduced by about 5% over the years. Our water use is reducing. So we're very conscious around the organisation on all of this. But now it's a case of saying we've got a great foundation, let's build. And I think what this brings to staff is hugely important, and also I think it's also going to be important as we hopefully can bring in new people to the organisation and bring ideas with them as well. So I think it's, you know, it's given us a great sense of where we are, but I think now we have to work on where we can get to. And I think what has been achieved shows we can achieve an awful lot more. And again, by coming together, I think that would be great.
That's it, and it's a roadmap, really.
Absolutely.
And
yeah.
pride has been mentioned actually almost by everybody. I think that's really interesting, authenticity. But as you were saying, it's kind of a roadmap, but it's also where we go to from now, which I'm going to come on to the leaders group with their last couple of minutes. But so when you get the mark, you are invited into our leaders group. Bernadette referenced this earlier on this morning. Because a fundamental tenet of the Sustainable Development Goals is businesses actually collaborating together. And we're looking at 3 issues in the leaders group: carbon, talent, worker of the future, and social inclusion. And Alaistair, you're chairing the Worker of the Future session. So we started this group last year. It's going great guns. Bernadette's doing an amazing job on bringing the group together. We have a meeting after this of Mark CEOs to talk about it, because change will not happen individually. And we were talking about this last night. What are you getting out of the leaders group? Because this is another meeting that you have to go to, but what are you getting out of it?
No, that's great. So as a consulting firm, you think you'd have a point of view on the worker of the future, the workplace of the future. Obviously you would. But actually the group allows us, all of the companies, to sit around the table and talk about their view on it. And I think one of the great advantages we have in Ireland, having worked many places all around the world, we have a great advantage in that we kind of naturally collaborate. When we get in a room, we're willing to share stuff. And the more we share, the more we've shared with Bernadette and all the folks around the table, the more we've learned that there are more flavours of this, more varieties of this than you could almost shake a stick at. But the value of that is you can begin, and we've put a very simple framework in place that looks at what we would call the good agile working environment, good agile worker of the future, and the not so good. What's impacting that, either from a workplace point of view, from a legal and from a policy point of view, from a technological point of view, from a benefits point of view, and really trying to put together a proper perspective on it. It's one of those situations where you sort of kind of think you know, sort of kind of the answer, and 6 months later you're finding out something every time we meet.
Yeah.
But at least we have a framework and we have a way of thinking about it now, and actually the power, each individual organisation I think thinks they have their own point of view on it, but the power of the collective is infinitely greater than the power of any individual conversation. And that might sound like an insight to the very obvious, but I think we'll arrive at a very, very interesting set of things. And having received the Working Responsibly mark 3 times, it is like a cup of coffee with Tina, because every time you get it, you know you're going to be asked something more in terms of the mark. Hopefully we'll be able to build something into the actual assessment around the work of the future. So sorry for the slightly long-winded, but it is an enigma wrapped up in a riddle wrapped up, but we're unwrapping it. And
They're
it
really
gives you the
interesting
opportunity to talk peer to peer,
Yeah.
person to person, and have a collaborative and real point of view on the issues that matter.
And they're fascinating conversations. And you've been at a couple of meetings. How are you finding it?
Great. Again, just understanding the challenges facing other CEOs and organisations, and understanding that they're much the same, probably. Sharing some of our best practice with others, and again, learning from others. So I think actually the challenges are the same, whether it's talent, employee engagement, whether it's sustainability and our role in that, whether it's youth employment and creating jobs. You know, it's all the same. So the power and the influence we have, how can we use that in a positive way?
Exactly.
And I think that's our role as CEOs and as leaders, not to take that for granted, and that we won't look back in 10 years' time and said we should have done more. And I think from an Irish perspective, the quality of companies we have here and the quality of thinking, I think we can make positive change, not just within Ireland, but be known worldwide for it.
Absolutely.
So I think there's a lot of really good things going on, as evidenced by so many companies getting the mark. I think it's how we bring that together and talk about it and share it with the people that can make changes, and government and stakeholders, to sell Ireland as a place to live and work and enjoy. So, you know, I'm very, very positive about what we can do and harness our rules, as I said, and the influence we have, and talk about the best practice in the different areas where we are good and how we've done it. I think, though, you know, things like diversity, which you know I harp on about, gender, there's still too much talk and not enough action.
Hear, hear.
And, you know, action means taking the risks on women the same way you do on men, working harder to attract women and understanding the issues that women have, usually with childcare, etc. And also ensuring that when they do come to your company, that the policies are there, the flexible working, the home working, the no meetings before 9 o'clock or after 5, which we have in Vodafone. There are no meetings because we don't need to have them unless there's a crisis. So this idea of presenteeism, this idea is I work 60 hours a week, aren't I great?
Yeah.
I say, no, you're not great. What's wrong with you? You know, that's the question I say. Do you need more help? So that is how you know, attract women and have diversity, because we need diversity of thought. I see the diversity, the questions that people have, that we get better decisions and we'll get the better business results by it. And it's the same thing on the boards. We need to get rid of the boys' club, really, you know, and we have to be brave and we have to question those companies that are still have it. Why aren't you making the change? What are you afraid of? And I think there's going to be a lot more questions of us as brands, by consumers and by investors. So we just need to move with it. And what I can say, it does work, and not to be afraid. And because the world is changing, you know, we're all getting a little old, some of us here. We need to change with it. We need to be more curious. We need to be more open. And we need to take risks and be brave. So that's, you know, really how I feel.
I loved it. I loved it. And it makes good business sense. We heard from Rick, we heard from Philip. It just makes good business sense. We have the last couple of minutes. I just want to give 30 seconds to everybody about, personally, why does this sustainability agenda matter to you? Tony, I'm going to start with you.
It matters to me personally because we're living on this one planet, and there's a responsibility in all of us to make a positive contribution, because if we don't, there's no guarantee that our future will be bright and will be sustainable. I'm thinking of the generations that are coming after me. I'm thinking of my own kids, and I want to make sure that we make a contribution now to a safer, more prosperous society for everybody.
Love it. Dee?
Yeah, I think it matters to me because if I don't do something, how can I expect anybody else to do it? Yeah. And I think, you know, really I think it's incumbent on all of us that we can make a difference. And it's being aware of sometimes the little thing that can go an awful long way.
Absolutely.
Also, I think, you know, for too long perhaps we have waited on government to make an impact. I think it's been proven time and time again that it's not just down to government, it's down to all of us. in business and personally, to come together, and together we can make that impact. Because I think unless we harness that people power, we're not going to change. And so for me, that is hugely important.
Absolutely. Anne, over to you.
So I suppose I feel personally it's the right thing to do. But apart from that, what I say to the people in Vodafone, because of the disruption and the competitive intensity and the world changing so fast, we need to make sure we're still around in 10 years' time. We've seen companies that have disappeared, gone, like the Nokias and the Blackberries that were so big. So how do we make sure that we're still relevant to our customers, to our employees, to our stakeholders, that we're watching the competitive dynamic and the customer demand and consumer demand and the political and social environment that we're seeing on social media, so that we're moving with the times, that the heartbeat of what's going on around us, that we're with it. And as I say to them, if we're the only telecommunications company left, let it be us. They love that. Because with the Microsofts, the Googles, the Facebook, we're trying to figure out where our place is.
Yeah.
So I think understanding our customer needs as well and their demands and meeting them and being much more transparent and fair to them, I think will ultimately make us sustainable and that we will do the right thing.
1000%. Alaistair, last word with you.
Red light flashing. I just agree strongly. The only thing I'd add, I always think there are many motivators in life, but sometimes when things get serious or acute, it's kind of fear or excitement. I'd be really kind of frightened for my young kids, not because I'm their dad, but I'd be really quite frightened for them, what's going on in the world generally. Yeah. How many hurricanes did you ever think you'd see in Ireland? Yeah. And that was a kind of a weird moment. To ring most of our staff and say, don't come to work. So there must be something going on. I don't know if it's right, left, I don't give a damn. There's something going on in the world we need to try and help fix. We also need to help fix the gender equality issues you talked about, so well said. The exciting thing is, surely to goodness, with everything that we have at our disposal, technology, the great brains, the education, and we as a nation sitting as a little island sticking off the west end of Europe, looking over the US, surely we can make a difference in this and be a voice, and everybody has to kind of have a voice. So if I sat there and kind of mulled over and did nothing about it, I'd kind of feel a bit less frightened and less excited. I'd be quite excited we could solve a lot of the problems, or at least give an idea to that, to the solution. But generally I would be just more frightened than I was 2, 5, 10 years ago. So that's probably the wrong way to look at motivation, but there you go.
No, we live in interesting times, as they say. Yes, it's about leadership, it's about authenticity, it's about pride, but it's also about good business sense as well and transforming the bottom line. Can I thank my amazing panel, Tony, Dee, Anne and Alaistair. Thanks everyone. Thank you.